This week's project is a portrait of sorts. You might want to work with the figure, or you might want to suggest the presence of a person through the way you compose a still life, or possibly a still life and an interior. So I've provided you with some photographs of Ruth, who's sitting writing at various tables, different locations, and I'm going to use those to start with some studies and then lead on to a painting. So as I say, you might want to use a figure. You could use the reference that I've given you, or you may have your own figure reference. If you use my figure reference, or if you find some others of your own, try and put them into your own setting, or at least manipulate the information in such a way that you're controlling the composition, drawing people's attention to particular things, playing down other things. And part of that whole process, which I'm going to begin illustrating now, might be to try out some of those composition exercises, and also to think about working with a limited palette. So things that we've done already. So my printer is completely rubbish, and that's what it looks like when I print it, but I can vaguely see Ruth over here. So I'm going to work with this particular pose first, and I think I want to have a bit higher up. I'll probably need to explain why I'm deciding these things. I certainly want to have plenty of table. Ruth wanted to tidy this table, but it looked perfect because it's like a writer's desk covered in books and things. So I wanted that. I think I might even want her a bit further up. So even though I'm working towards a portrait of a writer here, one of the ways in which I'm going to express that, depict that, is all the stuff on the table. And one of the images that I sent out with email is Degas' picture of, I think he's called Durante, but not that Durante. And he has bookshelves behind him, and the table is covered with books and writing equipment. So that's better. I like her like that, and I do think it's worth emphasizing that possibly this figure is more of a writer because of all that table. You might think, oh, the figure's important, but there's a lot that can be said, can be conveyed. So as I've often demonstrated before, I'm just working with charcoal, smudging it a bit on grey paper. I definitely want the full table, and there's a lot. There's a big book over here. And maybe, if I'm just working with my setting, I also think, and I saw this already, I have to say, when I looked at the photographs, I just could see a great square composition here, where again the window. So I'm going to do that. This was not done in good faith. I knew that this was going to happen as a setup. But I just felt that to have the window, the light, to actually have the writer a little bit in shadow here. I'll put some chalk on in a second, and probably then be able to bring out some light. It does present a problem for me though, which is how much table. So I've got to work that out. That might be all right. Anyway, a few more things on the table. So that's kind of reminding you of that composition exercise. Certainly think in terms, when you begin these compositions, add bits on, take bits off, move things around, and we can discuss what the effect of that is, but I would suspect that you'll see that for yourselves more and more. But this would be a good way to start then. perhaps start in monochrome, and if you want to introduce some contrast, some light, and thinking again about what the aim of the composition is. I want to draw attention to this person first, so a little bit of light on here is going to be helpful, and not just attention to the figure, but actually what's the figure doing. She's writing, so I can just use the light to a certain extent to draw attention to that, and maybe it's going to be books, bits of paper. So that can be quite a handy way to start, and I think against that I'll maybe use a different light. Might have a cooler light through the window. But that might be a start, and if I'm thinking of limited palette as well, I can choose my colours in a similar way. I think I want this figure to be a little bit lost. I have inside outside as well. That's another theme. I'll give her a little bit of colour in her dress. So that might be how I would use some of these photographs as a starting point for a composition. And if you could work with these figures or your own figures, your own setting, and think about conveying something of a narrative, a portrait with that subject. Or, and I'll do this next, you might just want to set up something with a writing table, or a letter subject. So let's do that next. So I've tried to set up something here that, well, it's actually not set up, it's the desk as it usually is, but I've put a piece of paper and a pen there, so this could be an accidental still life composition, but with a little bit of setting it up, because my theme might be the letter, so the writer's chair at the window. So if I draw here, I'm hoping you're going to see a little bit. So maybe the desk is across there. I'm just wondering, I would quite like to get the chair in. It's an attractive chair. I just have to see how well that will work. The chair's going to be there. The desk is here. And the letter, I purposely had that bit of paper hanging over the edge. So we did have a little bit of a discussion about this before. What about this composition exercise? What about still lives? If you're setting things up, and then how do you change the composition? It seemed to me that maybe working with an accidental still life, so things just as you come across them, you'd have more chance of having a sort of surprising yourself with how the composition developed. So my letter's there, so you can see all this. I would like a bit of window, I think, and I think it's good that the desk is at an angle like that, and I'll have the window at a bit of an angle. I've got a lot more windowsill in my view, but I don't really want, I want to fit in a bit of window. So that might be what I'd work with. I think it seems to me that if I get in quite a lot of dark under the table, then I can make the most of this letter, which is my theme, which is over the edge. The chair is possibly also a way of representing the person who's not present. And maybe I don't need so much desk. If I want to get a bit more window in, I could have a bit less desk. So that's playing around with that. Let me try a little bit of white. I've got my pen. So certainly this is again the off-white paper. I just get a bit of white pastel onto there. That's certainly going to make my window my letter stand out. Got to work on the chair. And again, I'll be thinking of limited palettes, not getting too colourful. So I might stay around some browns. And as I've said, I'm quite keen on a little bit of light in the window. And then of course, because this line is appearing, I remember now, I was going to expand the composition. So let's just get a little bit of colour on the table first. Right, those are the elements I started with, but if we're going to do this joined up teaching and remember about the composition idea, what will that do? It becomes a square. Certainly I would be building up a bit more dark under the table. I think that helps me make the letter stand out. It also probably makes a bit more sense of the chair, although I've got a wacky angle on the chair. So what do I get that's extra? I get the curtain. Can you see that you can? I'm just checking that you can see. Certainly it seems worth adding a bit more. Maybe I've got to do something with this chair first before I can know. I'm just wondering actually if I need to go all the way to the extra bit or just adding a little bit is worthwhile. I suppose if I stayed with a rectangle, if I added it on there, I could take it off here. So just trying out different possibilities. I mean, I haven't made so much of these books, which are certainly worth working with, I think, because it's quite nice. These books are colourful. And even if I'm doing a limited palette, just to have a touch of colour there is quite nice. Maybe I do want the curtain. Maybe the curtain is oh, the curtain's not there. The chair isn't even there. The chair's way back over here. Now, does that matter? Maybe that's better. Maybe I actually need a bigger chair, which is like that. I'm still not got the curtain in the right place, but maybe that's what I would do with that extra bit. So I'm moving that chair. I am going to include the curtain. And change some of my shapes around there. So the last thing I'll do here, I'll put a bit of light on the curtain and a bit of colour into the chair here. And I think probably colour-wise, if I was to work with this composition, I would stay with warm colours, with reds, browns, and just differentiate parts of the painting by colours within a narrow range. So I think that's how the chair is going to be there, and the curtain would also be red and red brown. And then I think it would be okay to have little touches of colour kind of locally with those books. Okay, so that is just trying to show you a few things all at once, maybe finding a still life that could suit that theme of the letter, the writer, and possibly arranging things a little bit. Arranging things on the desk, but more importantly, arranging things in your composition. So I think chair, curtain, books, they're all okay. This is unresolved. But I do think it's worth having. So I'd have to play around with that a little bit more. So I'm set up to paint now. This is the still life with just the letter and the chair and the desk. And that's the drawing I did of Ruth at the table. I've got the photograph, but I'm not going to look at that yet. I've got my square piece of canvas, and I just thought you might find it useful to see some beginnings, and I'll tell you what I've been up to lately. So I'm working on white canvas, and I'm going to, as you'll see now, I'm going to tint it with some off-white paint, rub it into the canvas, and then work into that with some dark paint. But because this is white when I start, even though I tint it with the oil paint, I can wipe some of it off, which is quite useful. I've tended to get people to put acrylic, let it dry, and then paint into it. But this is the answer. Sometimes I want to work on white, sometimes I want to work on tinted. If I tint it with oil paint, you'll see that I can wipe it off again, so you get the best of both worlds. So some of you will be drawing, but for those who are going to go on and paint, I'm hoping this will be useful. I've mixed up some burnt umber and some white and a little bit of cadmium yellow. And I'm just covering the canvas using a rag with that. So this is firstly getting rid of the white, which is very helpful. And I think the other thing that's useful is it actually means the surface of the painting is slightly wet. So when you do paint into it, there's going to be some mixing. Now I always get this shine. Anyway, let's hope that's okay. We can work with that. So that's a kind of ground, but because it's done in oil paint, it's going to stay wet. So I'll be able to wipe it off if I want in places. But much like I've been doing with my drawing, the next thing I do is a mixture of, again, the umber, and this time some ultramarine. So it's a black or it's a dark brown. And I'm going to paint into that wet surface with it, as I say, much like I might have done with the charcoal. And crucially, this whole business of composition, having worked out this composition and laboured at moving the figure up and including the window, I really have to work with that. So, my table edge is higher than the middle. It's up here. You remember that's what I was after. I was after a really big table with all these different things on it. So that means that my figure is quite small over there. So I've diluted that brown black mixture. Maybe it could be a little bit lower. And I'm going to have some window here. My figure, let's keep moving around a little bit. And all this is going to be dark as well. So I'm just really translating the kind of tonal pattern. That's not quite what I've got in the drawing. It's a little bit compressed, and I don't like that. I think either I need a different format, to cut it off there, or I need to lower the table. So, all worth seeing, that you can change things and reposition them, and you should do, try and, because everything is a little bit wet, but there's not too much paint, I can actually push things around. I recommend you do that. I haven't pushed things around very much, I've just dropped that table edge slightly. And you can see it's going grey. I'm picking up some of the wet paint, but I would encourage you not to worry about that too much. That's a bit better. And the other thing I wanted to demonstrate then, regarding this sort of approach, is being able to wipe back a bit. So when I was putting chalk, in fact now that I've done that, I don't mind that bit, I think that's okay. When I was putting chalk onto the drawing, that was a way of drawing attention to certain things in the composition. So now I've picked up a little bit of white spirit on my rag, and actually just to show you this, I can wipe back now to that white canvas. So the sort of thing that I might do with the chalk, if I stretch a rag over my finger, I can even do a little bit of wiping back here. You can see, I mean, it's a wee bit messy. It's not absolutely clean, but that's just quite a useful thing to be able to do at this point, whereby I can actually bring out a little bit of light in certain places. And if I didn't like that, I could change that again. But it's giving me a sense of the tonal pattern, whilst also allowing me to have this ground to unify things. Now I hope you can see that okay. It was catching a lot of light. That might be a bit better there. So I'm almost done with this demonstration, but I'll pause and mix a couple of colours and just put a couple of colours on last to show you what the next stage would be. So what would come next would be some blocking in of some of the main colours. And again, because of this, trying to work with the limited palette idea, because everything is wet, and I recognise this is just for the painters, but if you're working with oil paint and everything is wet, then actually the colours will mix a bit, and that will limit them, that'll restrain them slightly. So they'll, I've covered everything with a bit of brown, so that brown sort of mixes in. And if I'm trying to manage colour, control colour in that way, then that's quite useful. If you overdo it, it becomes muddying. But at the beginning, it's actually quite a good way of keeping all the colours together. So the things that I've sort of identified as significant are a certain amount of background colour, the green of Ruth's dress. And I did have a few other colours on the palette. I can put some light, put a bit of warmth and light in the figure. Yeah, let's do that. And then think maybe about what the temperature of the colour outside is, of the light. I've just got a little bit of warm colour here. Running out a bit. That's enough to warm up the face, and I'll light the face as well. I've got a tiny bit left over from something else. But it's nice that that white canvas already gives me a sense of what the light is going to be like. So, I'm going to stop demonstrating now, but that's just to go from the ideas. Is it a writer? Is it a writer represented by the desk and the book? And then trying the composition approaches to see if there's something better. I've ended up with a square, and I've started painting the square here. And I tinted the canvas and made sure that I repeated what was in the drawing in the painting. And then as this painting develops, I'll be wanting to remember, what's the theme? What is it I'm trying to draw attention to? And, putting that, the pen in her hand, not having too much going on outside the window. All those things will be to be considered and adjusted in order to make this a statement about a writer. Okay, I'll see you soon.